other people. I talk a lot about um, women's self-defense, women's personal protection, what it means to be safe, not just to feel safe, and not just about our physical safety, but thinking about things like social, being safe in our social environments, being safe in our financial security and other areas. Also, in my day life, in my other life, I am a commercial attorney. I have a cat, and I do all sorts of weird things for fun. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really happy that so many of you took the time today to join us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Espinosa. My pronouns are she, they. So, my background is that I am a recent graduate from California State University, Fullerton. I completed my master's in counseling with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy and clinical mental health. So, clinically, I've worked with many children and adult women survivors of domestic violence. And my research focus, my thesis equivalent project focused on counseling Asian American female survivors of sexual assault with an understanding of their experiences with racialized sexism, how enduring racialized sexism but can make them more vulnerable to sexual violence. And so, what are the mental health implications and treatment implications for that population? So, thank you so much for having me today. And I'm very excited to start the discussion.
All right, great. So to introduce myself, my name is Han, and I am the Director of Outreach at the Asian Articles. And today we also have Angela, our Director of Projects. Yeah, so I think that's all the introductions for now. We can start now. Okay, so our first question is, what, in your opinion, has contributed to racialized sexual violence of Asians? Yeah, so just unmute yourself to answer.
I can go ahead and start. So I think the very big, broad answers of what contributes to Asian American experiences with racialized sexism on the grand scheme are white supremacy and misogyny, deeply rooted histories in the United States of white power, white supremacy, as well as sexist and patriarchal norms. And we see this in a lot of historical events. One of the most prominent, which occurred, one of the first most prominent events demonstrating racialized sexism against Asian American women would be the case of the 22 lewd Chinese women. This isn't very well known, I believe, but what happened, this was in 1874, is you have Chinese women immigrating to the United States, to San Francisco, and then being put into jail simply on the basis of they look like prostitutes. We don't want them here in our country. And this went to the California Supreme Court. It eventually moved to the US Supreme Court, where it did end up being ruled in favor of the women to be able to immigrate to the United States. However, we see a year later the Page Act of 1875, which was an immigration ban of Chinese women under the guise of, well, we don't want women in our country who are immoral, who are sex workers. And even though the guise of the act was to prevent sex work, prostitution, immoral acts, so to speak, it really was a way to target Chinese women, Asian women in particular, which we see because that was the time of increase in Chinese labor. Eventually, we would have the act that banned all Chinese laborers. So historically, this has been sort of the story of our United States. And now we also see in US militarization, Japanese imperialism, the idea of comfort women, mail order brides, Asian women who are being forced into sex work, into prostitution because of US Army, Japanese Army. That's also something I want to note, that it's not just a white power dynamic. We also have horizontal racism among different Asian groups. I see Annette nodding. I'm sure she'll comment on that later. And then taking it into modern day times, we have the Stanford rape case, Brock Turner, where we have a white man who only received 6 months of jail time, even though he was caught in the act of raping, who we would find out later was an Asian woman. There was that, again, like that power differential. And of course, even more currently, that was 2015, but even more currently, 2021, we have the Atlanta spa shootings of someone blaming their sexual addictions on these Asian women who he did not know, who he had no relation to. So I think it goes back to that, again, white supremacy, racial hegemony, and misogyny, this entitlement to women's bodies that oftentimes men have towards women in general, but specifically to Asian women's bodies because we've been hypersexualized, because we've been fetishized and deemed to be these sexual, immoral beings. That's my rant.
And that's a really excellent rant. I don't have a lot to add to that. I appreciate, I think, the reminder on the history lessons that I think a lot of us weren't necessarily aware of until we started paying more attention to it, especially over the last year or so. One of the things that I did want to add, in addition to highlighting again Danielle's point about, it's not just white people beating down on Asian people. That's not what it's about. It's everybody looks for differences, right? And we try to other people. And that's one of the areas where Asian people, much like black and brown people, Latino and everything else, when you don't look like the people who are around you, it's very easy for the majority to other you. We're focused here on a very tight piece of that, but I know for me that's essentially because that's what I experience, right? Like I know what it's like to be a woman in this world. I don't know what it's like to be a minority man in this world, so I don't speak to that. The other thing I wanted to point out and bring up too is it's not just this history of how we are treated and how people treat other people in terms of specific political acts and things like that, is I'm also looking at the entertainment industry, which is very, very responsible for especially this racialized sexualization, all the way back. We're looking at, in the early 20th century, we have the lotus blossom ideal of the Asian woman, this very quiet but very sexually submissive woman, and we have the dragon lady, right, who is very sexually aggressive, and it's one of the two stereotypes. Like there's no middle ground, and that's continued as you've looked at movie history, show history, and things like that. And now we have sort of, it's not new, but we still have this Orientalism, the Asia files, and everything else. And we've seen that all the way back to when Europe discovered Asia, right? This idea that we're so fascinated with the exotic and we want the exotic in often a very sexual way, especially for the women, because those are the ones that are frankly easier for us to dominate, right? And we see that in the movies and see that in everything else. And then now we kind of get into sort of like this anime weave culture thing, um, which is a really interesting thing to talk about and look at because it's sort of like the modern Asiaphile, the modern Sinophile, where you have people who want to be Japanese, want to be Asian so much that they take on the appearances, the mannerisms, the language, and you look at them and go, but you're not. Like this isn't even a callback to I'm trying to take on my familial history culture. It's like you're not that, and you're trying to become one of me. And sometimes you're trying to become one of me so much that it takes on some really interesting, and I say interesting in a I don't know how else to say it, sexual overtones and racialized overtones.
Yeah, adding on to that, how do you think that issue of the rise of Asian fishing in the recent years has really aggravated this issue? And how do you think the internet has also kind of factored into it too? Um, so Danielle, do you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah. Well, like on one
Sure.
hand, we're supposed to be super flattered, right? Like people think that we fit these particular sexual stereotypes and it's very sexy, it's very exotic, people want to be us. And we're also supposed to be flattered because people want to culturally emulate us. Like look at how much we like you. We want to, learn more about you. We want to learn so much about you. We want to speak your language better than you do. Um, but on the other hand, like it's kind of creepy.
Yeah,
Also, this is
and
my cat, Tuna.
hello. I see a cat and my brain just shuts off.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, going off of like the media representation, and Han, you had mentioned this trend of Asian fishing. That's something that just recently came on my radar, where you have oftentimes white women who are putting on makeup or are putting on particular clothing, sort of to look Asian, to emulate Asian traits. And the issue with that is, you know, you have this white person, the person with a lot of privilege, with a lot of power, emulating Asian features, our culture, our dress, and emulating those stereotypes that Annette went into, the lotus blossom, the China doll, the dragon lady. They can emulate these traits, they can emulate these stereotypes, and then further perpetrate that stereotype of, well, this is how Asian people are. And at the end of the day, they can wash off their makeup, they can change their clothes, they don't have to deal with the oppression of actually being an Asian person while furthering these harmful stereotypes. So us Asian women are the ones who have to suffer because of it. And on that note of like media, I know you mentioned anime, how Asians are portrayed in the media. I know there was this sort of viral, I think it was a TikTok story of a person who went on a date with a man she was an Asian woman and went on a date with a man who loved anime, loved manga, like loved all those things. And then when she wasn't acting in the way that he expected to because of this media, what he was consuming, because of the media that portrayed Asian women as submissive, as hypersexual, he was confused. He was shocked. He's like, why are you not acting like these anime girls that I watch? So this portrayal of Asian women as the lotus blossom, as a China doll, as a dragon lady, it always hurts us in the end. Yeah.
Another part of it that I find difficult is that, it, we have this perception of, what does it mean to be Asian, right? And then we see so many people who, you know, take that on almost to an extreme. Like they're trying to be more Asian than Asian. And it's very difficult to live up to, and it's very difficult to be true to yourself, I think, with that. And that adds to the challenge of, like Danielle mentioned about this TikTok of not living up to the expectation, of not living up to this perception. Well, when we have people out there who have these ideas of what that looks like, whether it's from people who are trying to, kind of take on that persona, or because of what they see in media representations, both, the fictionalized ones and the nonfiction, is like, okay, but how do I just be me? Like there's this whole extra overtone of what it means to be me that's very difficult to work with and very difficult to live around other people with.
Yeah, also, just a quick, interlude. Our third panelist, Mollii, has just joined. So, so just introduce yourself. Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mollii. Sorry, I'm a little late. I couldn't get the password right. I thank you for having me. It's an honor. And I am a co-founder of a nonprofit called Tough Love Fitness. We're based in Oakland, California, and the nonprofit runs programs like Tough Love Self-Defense, where we offer free self-defense to our community, which pertaining to the AAPI community, we've offered 2 in-person workshops so far this year. In addition to that, it runs another program called the Sweaty Betties, and it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a martial arts Jiu-Jitsu group. We've been around for like 12 years, and I am a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I've been training for 14 years, teaching about 12 years. In addition to with the nonprofit, what we do is we just recently acquired a gym in Oakland, California, and we converted that gym to a nonprofit. And that gym is It's an inclusive gym that has programs for women, programs for LGBT folks. So yeah, so I mainly run programs and I teach martial arts and self-defense.
Hi, Molly. It is great to it's great to meet you. So yeah, so to continue on with what we were talking about before. So as we previously covered, like talking about this racialized sexual violence towards Asian, particularly Asian women. So what are the ways that we can help these affected communities, and what have you personally done to protect yourself and other Asian Americans from this issue?
Is this a question directly for me?
Yeah, just just anyone can unmute and answer.
Well, for me, I work really closely with women, particularly women of color, in terms of just coming into your power, coming into your body through martial arts and through self-defense. So it has martial arts and self-defense has empowered me in so many ways. It's helped me to realize one of the things that we say is that many parts of our culture places value on what women look like. Self-defense and martial arts place value on what our body could do, right? So it places value on what your body and what your body can do. So it has taught me that, and it's been a transformative and powerful experience for me. So one of the main reasons I teach is for that, to sort of pass that on to my community, and particularly one of the passion that I have is particularly AAPI community, right? You can't really tell right now, but I'm really petite. I'm 4'11", right? And I could choke, somebody who is 2-3 times bigger than me, and it doesn't rely so much on strength and power, but it relies on leverage and angle and body alignment, right? And to know that, I feel from my own personal experience, have been extremely empowering. So I want to kind of share that with my community, particularly my AAPI women, because I feel we're really strong and badass already, and we just need techniques to back that up, right?
I need to fangirl for a moment, Mollii. I also train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I've only been doing it for 3 years, so I'm just a blue belt, and I would love to train with you at some point. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting hearing you talk about it that way, because the world I came from is primarily firearms training combatives. In fact, combatives is how I got into BJJ when I, died at a class and decided I need to learn more skills than I could learn in a weekend. But it's the same thing. My focus has largely been on women, and on, I like to say that On Her Own, which is my project, is very, very inclusive. It's women focused, but it's really everything that it takes for somebody to be able to manage life in those moments when you don't have more. And that moment for a lot of us has to do with personal physical self-defense. And knowing that you are able to manage that makes everything so much more possible to manage. When I know that I can, well, I'm a blue belt, so at this stage, when I know I could keep somebody from choking me out or subbing me for 5 minutes, that's a lot, right? That means so much for, okay, for 5 minutes, I can talk here on this panel. For 5 minutes, I can, walk alone to my car. For 5 minutes, I can manage my own finances. And I came at it from a firearms world where it was, I can control this thing, this super powerful thing that has the power to hurt people and to kill people, but it's under my control. And it's something that I can use to make sure that nobody controls me. That nobody else, as my friend Lynn Gibbons says, can impose their will on me. Right? And I think that being able to show people both as a example and as practical instruction, and in practical terms what that looks like and how they can do that too. That's a lot of the work that I do on her own. Most of that, right, is not through physical workshops or physical instruction, but I do a lot of writing and media work of, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what you can do. These are the things that you are capable of. Go out, train, go out, become strong, become healthy, and be amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh yeah, sorry, Danielle. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say, I do not come from an athletic background. Both of these women could kick my butt, and I highly invite it. I think my expertise or my stance in terms of helping these affected communities, I think I come from more of a mental health and a social justice lens. So integrating the idea of that when these microaggressions happen, when these traumas happen, whether it's being catcalled, whether it's being sexualized, or whether you have experienced sexual violence, I think it is very important to seek support, whether that's from a trusted friend, trusted loved one, a therapist, if you have the privileges and abilities to seek mental health support. I think that's very important, as well as the social justice piece of, if you see this happening in public, call it out. Helping to dismantle the systems that allow this to happen, whether that's dismantling white supremacy, racism, sexism, misogyny. That's a whole tangent and topic in and of itself, but that's sort of my focus on how do we do this. And in my thesis research, my particular focus is, well, how do we counsel? How do we do therapy with these populations? And one of the big pieces that comes up is this aspect of shame that is so pervasive throughout Asian American cultures, just as a general, whether our parents shame us because we failed a test, because we're not doctors. We already have that layer of shame. And now we add in the shame of, well, you're just a sex object. You wore that skirt. That's why you were catcalled. That's why you were assaulted, so on and so forth. So when we have these layers of shame from both our culture and both from the trauma itself, how do we address that? How do we decrease that shame to know that it wasn't your fault? It's never the victim's fault, and all of those clinical implications, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's just really something that's like kind of built onto you, or like when you're really young, and then yeah, it just kind of continues. All right, so moving on to our next question. How do you think we can grow from the experiences of racialized sexual violence, and how we can learn from it and like grow as a society? Yeah.
I think that's a super tough question, I think, because we're in the middle of it. And Danielle, as a therapist, will tell you this is probably the hardest time for you to look ahead, is when you're kind of really sunk in the middle of it. One thing I didn't mention is how I've kind of shifted my focus more to AAPI women is, I've been lucky to live a very white life in a lot of ways. I don't live in an area with a large Asian community. I don't have very many AAPI friends. So until really the last, call it 15, 18 months, it wasn't a big part of my life to think of myself as Asian. And now everybody does, right? Except when it's inconvenient for them too. So one of the big lessons that I've learned here is that this is an opportunity, right? Pain is an opportunity to find out what is it that is putting us in this uncomfortable position, and what is it that we can do to not be uncomfortable, You know, what are the steps that we can take? And there's a it's not a fun opportunity. It's not something that, you know, I would have chosen for myself, I think, you know, back at that moment. But looking back, it sounds so cliche, but it's made me a better person because it's made me more aware and it's made me more able to articulate this to my friends because I've had to think about it now. And I have a couple of friends who are on here now, followers, people I talk with on a fairly regular basis. And it's really not been until the last 15 or 18 months where I've been able to say, hey, this is a thing, and this is how it affects me, and this is why certain aspects of my life are a little bit different because I am AAPI, because I'm a woman. Now I can help educate you too. And I think that that's actually a really powerful thing to come out of it. Like I said, not what I would have picked, you know, not an experience I definitely want, but certainly one that we can all grow from.
Yeah, I really want to highlight that aspect that you said of becoming aware of these topics, likely due to the unfortunate circumstances of our current age with COVID, with the labeling of like the Chinese flu or whatever, the rise in Asian hate crimes, the shooting in Atlanta, having to become aware of these issues and sort of talking about them for the first time, it's jarring. It's absolutely jarring for our community. And I think in terms of, you know, how we grow as a society, how we start to build a society that moves past this, I think the first step is that awareness and having these sort of conversations, having people to talk about it. And, you know, when we think about Asian American women, the statistics show that 20 to 50% of Asian American women have experienced some sort of gender violence. And if you hear that statistic and you're like, 20 to 50%, that's a huge margin. The reason is because we don't talk about these things. We don't report. We're the least likely ethnic group to report our experiences with sexism, with sexual violence. And back to that shame piece, it's because we blame ourselves, because there's this shame tied to it, because in our culture we're told that we deal with it. We say, face, you have a problem, deal with it. Like, don't talk about it. You're going to bring shame to your family, you're going to bring shame to yourself. Just be resilient and power through it, which, as we know, doesn't work. We can't go through these things by ourselves. And so I think that first step of we're becoming aware of it, we're having these conversations, we're coming together as a community to talk about it. I think in that in and of itself is so powerful. And I hope that as a community, as a culture, that we continue to have these conversations. And even within our community, starting with our community and then moving to other ethnic groups, other people of color. So we all know we're all on board, we can all support each other. Yeah.
Mollii, do you have anything to add to it?
Yeah, I really appreciate what has been shared so far. So as I was listening, one of the things that keep coming back to my mind is there's a saying in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know, Annette, if you heard it before, but the feeling of being comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. So when in the context of Jiu-Jitsu, it's being comfortable on the mat when the person might be bigger, stronger than you, and they're out there to choke you out, right? To stay kind of calm and get out of the situation or survive. And taking that from the mat, the lesson from the mat to like real life and what's happening, that has been the case for me. So I had mentioned earlier that this year we did 2 in-person self-defense and safety workshop for the AAPI. So I was really, you know, it was like I have done self-defense workshops many times, and taught like self-defense and martial arts class, you know, hundreds. But I've never done it in a context of an AAPI community. I was really nervous, so I spent a lot of time I wanted to be helpful. I didn't want to go up there and teach something that may not apply to the community. So what I did was I did a lot of research. I read up a lot about the surge of violence. I watched a lot of videos. And what happened to me was I went on it triggered a traumatic experience for me. And I went into this kind of state where I was really anxious, really kind of, the bottom line was I didn't feel safe. I was really just being bombarded by all the information and the videos. And I really had a hard time, right? For about a week. Like I wasn't sleeping well, eating well, and I was really uncomfortable. And then after a week, I through talking and reading about other people's experiences, I realized that what I was experiencing was very similar to a lot of people in my community. And I began to finding I was felting a lot of things that I couldn't articulate, but through other people, I was able to find words to articulate what I was feeling during that time that I was doing the research. But since I can remember as an Asian woman to be in some ways invisible in certain areas, but really visible in other areas, in terms of being sexualized and seen in a hypersexual context, right? I'm seen in that all my life. But then in other aspects, I'm kind of invisible. And so one of the things that came out of this for the past, over a year is that for me to kind of understand and put words in terms of like how I have been feeling, and the fact that I wasn't alone. There was all these, it's like a whole community that was feeling the same way. And so it was traumatizing on one hand, but I felt really connected and in solidarity with in the same sense. So with that said, I think I fully believe that healing and positive movement forward start with us, right? And then, I feel like it's really hard to kind of be part or help a community if we ourselves are not able to do that for ourselves. So I feel like if we could, as much as possible, really, do that for ourselves and be strong enough to go, out and extend that to, our AAPI community and then the community at large. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Yeah, so we'll now move on to the open discussion where everyone can just unmute and ask questions, or you can also send it to the chat and I'll ask the questions for you. Yep, so feel free to, unmute or send the questions in the chat.
I have a question. I have a question for Mollii. So I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and what my coaches have been trying to I guess motivate me and becoming more confident with my jiu-jitsu, because for me, I get really scared, and today I was sparring and I was on mount and I was about to go in the armbar, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the armbar because I was like, oh no, he's gonna get up. So I'm wondering, how do you build up confidence to execute the move without hesitating and fighting up instead of fighting beginners?
That's a good question. Okay, so I had mentioned that I started the Sweaty Betties, right? The reason the Sweaty Betties came about 12 years plus is because of that I have trauma in the past, and jiu-jitsu was not and is not easy for me, particularly in the beginning. It was traumatizing. I mean, I had a lot of anxiety about it, a lot of doubts about it. And back in the day, I was the only woman. And if there was another woman, it was a woman that was, much bigger and stronger. So I was always the petite one. And I had a lot of trouble. I mean, I struggled with it, where to the point where I was going to quit. And I had a really good teacher that had the sensibility to see through all that and helped me form the Sweaty Betties. And the reason I was able to still be in jujitsu and got my black belt is that if you could, form an alliance, either with other women or with other training partner, that I think that would be helpful, because I feel like jujitsu, one of the things that is common to talk about is the technique, but we don't talk about the psychological and emotional aspect of it, which is huge part of that. So I would say, maybe the Sweaty Betties was my support system, right? And we bond together and help each other through a lot of those things that you're talking about. And then the other is having a training partner meet up and maybe drill, those techniques, that it overrides your thinking and it becomes kind of a natural physical reaction to a situation when you're sparring. Does that make sense?
I want to point out this is an area where jujitsu has taught me many life lessons. And, Mollii talks about getting some training partners that you can train with on a regular basis, or at least, picking out the folks in class that you can always go and roll with, because you know that they're going to give you a good training experience and not just smash you or just be, something where you can smash them and you're not learning anything either. It's kind of like that in the rest of life too. Is so many of us think that we have to do things on our own. Like that's the whole name of my thing here, is like on her own, because we're strong, independent women. We're allowed to ask for help. In fact, some of the strongest people, sometimes the biggest strength, is being willing to ask for help. That's the hardest part.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking the question. So Joshua, you can unmute or just send your message in the chat. And
Yeah, so I know this is kind of like a weird question and also like a stupid question, but uh I was trying to figure out, so I know there's not a lot of like, AAPI like representation in media and film. And so I was wondering, do y'all have any like TV shows or movies to educate myself on like AAPI like topics that are like sensitive but also willing to like be like an ally to y'all? Because I feel like that I went to this webinar last month. They did like a 31-day webinar of Chinese American Heritage Month, and they talked about a lot of like AAPI things that I really did not know about. So I was wondering if y'all have any TV shows or movies.
Not exactly a TV show or movie, but something that I enjoyed, which I hope is still up. It's through PBS. They did a special called Asian Americans. I just watched it online. I just Googled PBS Asian Americans. And I believe it's a 4 or 5 part documentary series. Each episode is about 40 minutes, an hour long. And it talks about the history of Asian Americans, the history of Asians in the United States, also addressing the histories of oppression. I found it to be very informative. I know, also on a side note, I know you didn't ask for book recommendations, but that's sort of my nerdiness. If I could recommend a book or two for you, I would definitely recommend Minor Feelings by, I believe, Kathy Park Hong. She writes a memoir about her just upbringing as an Asian American woman, I believe in Koreatown, I want to say, as well as Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So she was the survivor of the Stanford rape case. And she wrote this beautiful memoir about what it was like to be a survivor of sexual assault, but also her experience as an Asian American woman.
Annette or Mollii, do you have anything to add on to that, or?
Yeah, now I'm gonna go and find a movie because I'm embarrassed that I don't know. But the only thing that comes to mind is the one that was recommended, the PBS show. Yeah, that was super informative and well done.
I was a fan of the PBS miniseries as well. I know I learned quite a bit from it myself, and I thought I was pretty well versed in the history of AAPI in America, and apparently I wasn't. Um, One of the things that I really have enjoyed are the movies where we have AAPI representation where they aren't the Asian character, right? Like I think of like Lucy Liu in Charlie's Angels, where she's just another one of the women kicking butt in the movie. She's not the Asian woman ninja. She's not, she's just another woman, but she happens to look more like me. And that's kind of, one of the things that always makes me happy to see is I turn on a movie and go, oh wait, they didn't make a big deal out of this, but there she is, or there he is. So I think that that's not really a direct answer on what movies can I watch and how can I help, but I think supporting that idea of we don't have to play one of the stereotypes, we can just be, is really, really important.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your participation and for the panelists for answering their questions so far. And so now we'll move on to Mollii's self-defense demonstration. So we're so lucky to have her here today to demonstrate some few self-defense techniques that you can use if you're ever in that situation. So I'll transfer the screen to her. Oh wait, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Okay, man, I was talking the whole time. um, so to me, self-defense is much more than a set of like techniques. It's a mindset that begins with the belief that you're worth defending, right? And it is also a lot more than
You just froze up, Mollii.
A lot of continuous training, but there are certain things that I can share with you that could be immediate that you can use, right? So I'm going to share a screen if that's possible. Could I share a screen? Okay, let me see.
Yeah, you should be able to now.
It's saying, okay. So I am going to share a slide. So we cannot be in self-defense mode 24/7, right? It's going to affect the quality of your life. It's not a way to kind of like live. But what I like to use is the concept of the triangle of victimization as a way to kind of think about when to use self-defense, right? And that said, triangle victimization is a concept where for any type of assault or crime to exist or to happen, they have to have these three components. And these three components are: you have to have a target, you have to have a perpetrator, and you have to have an opportunity. So if either one or two of these components are missing, a crime, an assault will not happen. So I like to use the example of maybe you're in a supermarket, right? And you have a thief that's standing next to you. The chances of you getting robbed in that particular situation is really low because you're in a public place, well-lit place, there's people around you. So basically you have a potential target, you have a perpetrator, but the opportunity is not there, right? So the triangle is not closed. So the chances of you getting robbed is very, very low. But if you leave the supermarket or the store at kind of closing time and you go in the parking lot, you're on your phone, you're distracted, you're not paying attention, then the perpetrator has the opportunity to close the triangle, right? And carry on the crime. So when you're out and about in the world, or with strangers or non-strangers, this is something to think about. If ask yourself, is the triangle of victimization complete? If the answer is yes, then that's when we kick in our self-defense mode, right? And so another thing about self-defense is that self-defense starts long before somebody, before a physical fight happened, before somebody put their hands on you, right? Our first and most important line of self-defense is heightened awareness, right? And with that said, if you find yourself in a situation where opportunity in the triangle of victimization component is high, then here are some ways to dial up your awareness, right? The first component is listening to your intuition. I think most of us know what that is, right? It's kind of your senses that tells you more often than not, the situation doesn't feel right, or that person doesn't feel, it's just something about that first person you don't feel right about. So we all have the ability to sense danger by simply listening to our feelings, right? Anytime you're in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, the hair in the back of your head stands on end, your stomach is not feeling right, and you respond to that, chances are you will move yourself away from a bad situation. Another awareness strategy is being aware of your surrounding, right? Again, we don't want to be into self-defense mode all the time, right? Only when we feel like the triangle is broken. So if you are in a situation where opportunity is high, you want to be aware of your surroundings. You don't want to be on your phone. You don't want to be in your head. You want to basically be in the present moment, pay attention to your surroundings, the people around you, right? The third component is good, strong body language, right? More often than not, a perpetrator will pick somebody who they feel that are distracted, who they feel or they perceive the person to be meek, mild, right? So you want to convey confidence and focus, right? When you move around in the world. So one of the ways, if people want to practice, is very simple, right? You could, a lot of us are on the phone, we're paying attention on the phone, our head is down, we're not paying attention. Simple way to kind of modify the way that you carry yourself in a confident, focused way is having your shoulder up and down, where it pushes your chest up, you look taller, your chin is up, and you're paying attention. You're looking at people, you're focused, and you're walking with purpose, and you're paying attention versus getting lost in your thought. That projects that you're confident, that you're focused, and you're paying attention, and that equals not being an easy target. It also also gets you to be involved in the community. You're more alert of your surrounding and the people around me. If there's something is happening with other people around you, you could be present to kind of be available to help if you're able to do that, right? Another really good self-defense is using a voice, right? This is something that as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I was fine with sparring with guys that, folks that are like much bigger than me, stronger than me, right? But when it comes to using my voice, I was really uncomfortable. It was not natural for me. I struggled with it for a long time. It really took a lot of practice and mindfulness for me to get to the point where I'm comfortable to use my voice as self-defense. So in terms of self-defense, we use our voice to set boundary, to reinforce boundary, to alert bystander intervention, right? And the level of the self-defense with your voice may vary. It may be, if somebody's approaching you, it could be, right? Let me just show the slide for this one. So this is verbal self-defense, right? I'm going to talk about strangers first. It may be an uncomfortable, excuse me, you know, I don't feel comfortable, stay where you're at. I don't know you, you're making me really uncomfortable, right? You can use it to establish a boundary in that sense. Or if you are in a situation where there's immediate threat, you can definitely use your voice and go, stop, stay where you're at, scream, you know, make a commotion to alert bystanders around you to help you, right? You can also use it to ask for help. You know, one of the things I have here is, can somebody videotape this man? He's bothering me, right? You can use your voice to ask for help in that sense. You can also use your voice with non-strangers, people that you know, right? By using the 3-part statements. And those statements include state the behavior, state how it makes you feel, and state the desired outcome. So with somebody you know, for instance, you know, you can state like, you know, excuse me, you're standing too close to me. It makes me really uncomfortable. Could you back up a little bit, right? It's really clear what it is they're doing, how it makes you feel, and it's really clear in terms of what you want them to do, right? So verbal self-defense, we can use immediately, and it's very effective, right? These are strategies that's very helpful in terms of what I call non-contact self-defense. And let me stop sharing. So in terms of physical self-defense, I think that I want to talk about 2 philosophies that's really important, right? Self-defense philosophy. And the first one is risk assessment, right? Let's say that you use all those heightened awareness that I just mentioned, and then we're going back to the parking lot scenario. Let's say that you're using all those strategies and you pick up a potential threat, right? You, from the corner of your eyes, you see a shady person looking and coming in your direction, and you don't know what their intentions are, right? Because in all honesty, a person coming towards you does not mean that they have bad intentions. How do we reveal their action? How do we reveal their intention, right? And the answer is setting boundaries, right? And we set our boundaries by using our voice, while using strong body language, and we tend to have our hands up, right? If people want to practice, it would be, and we hold ourselves in manner where we have good base, where we're not easily pushed over or pulled. And to have a good base, if we're standing in this manner where my legs are staggered, it's really, I don't have good base. I can be easily pushed backwards or forward, right? But in martial arts, having a stagger stand or good base, it means that you step, you're strong. A lot of times, if you have a choice, your strong leg back, right? Where it's staggered, it's not next to each other, it's staggered. And your knees are slightly bent, right? And in terms of you are in a threat situation, I recommend that you have your hand, maybe definitely not have your hand in a fist, because this is what it looks like is you want to escalate, you want to fight. We don't want to do that. We want to, as much as possible, de-escalate, distract, and escape, right? So we want to protect ourselves. We want to have our hands up, right? Just in case there's a reach, there's a grab, there's a punch. So we want to have our hands up. If somebody's reaching out or punching us, we can block it, So our hand is up, we have good base, right? And we want to be able to, in this stance, we want to be able to move in a good base just in case somebody is charging at us, right? So, so if you are in a parking lot and you see somebody approaching you, and you don't know what their actions is or what their intentions are, you would turn towards them, have a good body, strong body stance, good base, your hand, you know, it may not, probably you're gonna look weird looking like this, but I tend to kind of, when I'm teaching the class, I have my students have their hand like here, but in normal world, you would have your hand, like I'm talking to you, my hand is up, I can have my hand in a prayer. So I have my hand here, right? Just immediately, yeah, if there's a grab, my hand could block and shield me. So I would turn, if I see the person coming towards me, I would turn towards the person and I would establish boundary and reinforce it, right? By turning towards them and say, excuse me, sir, I don't know you. You're making me really uncomfortable. Stay where you're at, right? So I would establish that boundary. Now, in terms of another philosophy, really important philosophy in terms of self-defense is distance management, right? So we don't want to establish boundary and have the person be right here or really close to us, right? We want to have, if we can, we want to establish boundary where they cannot reach us or kick us, right? So we want to create a safety bubble, and a safety bubble is about 2 arms length or COVID length, right? It's either that length or longer. And if you are able to create a safety bubble, then that person cannot reach you, hit you, kick you, right? So the first thing that you want to think about is you want to create that distance, that safety bubble around you, right? If they move towards you, then you cannot just stand there. You have to move back and continue to create that safety distance, right? So anybody has any questions so far?
Can I
I
add a
mean, I
couple
can
of
go
things?
on, but the you know, yeah.
Can I add a couple things? I love this
Yeah.
content. It squares very well with the stuff that I've done inside the combatives community as well. If I can make a recommendation on reading material for boundaries, Creepology is a very quick little read, and it talks about the process of setting boundaries. And I like the work from the Shivworks Collective on managing unknown contacts, MUCK, which also talks about that ability to kind of keep your hands up, kind of keep that motion in place, and using language to keep people away from you. And then the other thing I want to mention, and this is part of the giveaway that one of my partners is helping sponsor, is pepper spray. So this is palm pepper spray, and when Mollii talks about maintaining that space bubble around you, one of the ways you can maintain that bubble, and sometimes is necessary, is a form of weapon. You know, hands can do a lot. Hands can't do everything, especially when we're smaller. Pepper spray is available in most of the country. It's legal in most of the country to carry. It's not very expensive. It's very difficult to screw up. I have some videos on my page about how to use it, and it fits right into this paradigm that Mollii's talking about setting boundaries, telling people, hey, don't come closer, stay over there. And if they come towards you, if you can't arc away or move away from them, then sometimes one of the things you can do is add a little pepper spray to the equation, and that makes very clear that you meant what you said. And then, it also gives you some advantages in the fight and everything like that. But
you have I think it's important to have a good instruction
Yep.
in terms of pepper spray, and you have videos for that?
Yes, there are videos on the On Her Own Facebook page, and the package that we're giving away and the package that's available directly from Palm comes with a trainer spray so that you can practice this without actually having to experience pepper spray.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So again, can you mention the reading materials again?
Sure, and I'll put it in the chat too. The book is called Creepology, and it's by Anna Valdesari. And it's a book, it's about creeps, right? Like what is it that makes a person creepy?
Mhm.
And the thing that makes a person creepy is they're always brushing up against boundaries, and they're always trying to push through those boundaries in a very subtle sort of way.
Mhm.
So one of the parts of the book that I found very, very helpful was taking that sort of three-step process that you have, Molly, about how to set a boundary with somebody you know, and gives you some scripts for it and gives you some examples and helps you really understand that if you have trouble with what do I, I know what a boundary is, but how do I actually do this?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, it's kind of silly and it feels weird to have these scripts, but it's also helpful because you, um, when it does actually happen, a lot of times we kind of freeze up, and these scripts could be helpful, in moments where, these incidences that happen. Um, so yeah, so. Again, I could go on for few hours teaching techniques. So it progressively keeps going, right? You set boundaries, and if that person does not respect your boundary, then you know what their intentions are, and that's when you use physical self-defense. Your physical self-defense would kick in. So it depends in that scenario. It depends on what the person does. If the person apologizes and leave, well, cool. But if the person charge at you or come at you with a punch, then you definitely need, we amp up with our self-defense, physical self-defense techniques. So with that said, if people are interested, we since March of 2020, because of COVID, we had shifted our self-defense training online, and we offer it for free for folks every month. And if people are interested, to definitely check out toughlovefitness.org. I'll put it on the chat. And each month we cover different techniques, self-defense techniques. So please do come and join if you can. So I'll put the. Do people have any questions? Any specific questions about self-defense or techniques you want to see? Well, thank you so much then for having me.
I'm sorry, I was busy making sure I had the website up so that I could sign up later on.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. So to Molly, to Annette, to Danielle, thank you so much for coming and for participating. And thank you to everyone who came. This was really educational, and just, yeah, personally, I learned so much. And we'll also be uploading this to our YouTube channel in case you want to reference back to it later, because everything here is just, yeah, it's really informative. And the chat, we're trying to figure out a way to save the chat and somehow put it into the description of on the YouTube channel. So yeah, we'll work on that. But thank you so much for coming. And yeah, be sure to participate in our giveaway that we're collaborating with Annette's project on for the pepper spray. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.